everyone, it's Reagan, and today I am doing a very long overdue book unhaul. I'm gonna be honest, I don't love unhauling books. I know some people find it very cathartic, understandably so, but this today is a book unhaul coming from pure and utter necessity. I feel like it's become kind of a running joke that I have not enough book storage and clearly way too many books. A lot of people want bookshelf tours, but the reality is my life is just one big giant book stack and me haphazardly shoving books into places hoping that they'll fit and no one will notice, but we all notice because it's not very well done. So today I took a long hard look at my bookshelves and I am getting rid of two very large stacks of books. A lot of them I really would like to keep, but the reality stands, I simply do not have the space for all of these books, plus the books I know I want to buy for the rest of the year. So a lot of these books I'm saying farewell to, I'm donating them. I personally like to donate to my library or neighbors and things like that. When I can, that's my personal best approach, but a lot of these books you might see me pick up again one day because in full transparency, I'm still interested in a lot of these. It's just like I had to pick these or those, and I picked those over these. What am I even saying? Anyway, that's a long disclaimer to say I am getting rid of a lot of books today and I had to be very hard on myself. So we're gonna go ahead and dive right in. So the first few books might come at a bit of a surprise, and that is the Mime Order and the Song Rising by Samantha Shannon. This is a series I'm actually really interested in reading. I've read the Bone Season, but I've owned book 2 and 3 for as long as I can remember, and I don't necessarily foresee myself picking them up anytime soon. Combining with the fact that I'm not quite sure on the versions I own of this, I kind of want to do some market research, if you will, and decide on the best editions of these I want to read moving forward. I'm not super in love with the new covers for the US hardback, and they obviously no longer match these versions of covers, so I'm gonna donate these and then do the research I wanna do to figure out what version of these I wanna buy in the future when I have a bit more space and when I anticipate actually picking these books up. But for now, I don't think I'm gonna be reading them anytime soon. I've owned these for like 3-4 years. So it's time for me to pass these on until I actually think I'm going to read them, and then I'll be buying all new sets of probably UK editions because I love UK covers. Next up, I have 3 books that I have just owned for a really long time and I don't think I'm gonna pick them up. Same story. Actually, I'm gonna probably stop saying that. For all of these books, I just don't foresee myself reading them anytime soon, which is really the primary reason I'm getting rid of most of these, outside of like having duplicative copies, which is another big reason. So the first one I'm going to show off is the book of Essie. This is a book I got 3 or 4 years ago now, and it has a lot to do with cults, which I do think is interesting, but it has kind of middle reviews, and simply I don't anticipate reading this. I have been wanting to read more literary fiction, but looking at my shelves is falls kind of at the lower end of the list, so I've decided to pass it off to someone who will read it and get joy from it. So if this is a book I'm getting rid of. Same can be said with Severance and The Dinner List. Both of these intrigue me, particularly Severance, but same sort of story. I don't think I'm gonna read it. Like, this is not a trash talk because I have actually heard really good things about Severance, but if I'm being realistic with myself and if I need to clear up some space, we're not keeping it. No excuses, Reagan. Definitely gonna pass these along as well. I think this cover is extraordinary. I think it's so beautiful and simple. And then this, yeah, okay, but yeah, I'm unhauling these. Next up, I have the Immortals series by Tamara Pierce. One, I don't really love these covers. Like, these aren't books that inspire me to like show them off on my bookshelves. And 2, this is a middle grade series I've read about half of later in my life. I feel like a lot of people have like a childhood association with these, which I just don't have. I read them a couple years ago, half of them a couple years ago, and I thought they were good. They didn't blow me away, nor did they blow my mind, and I just don't necessarily feel I'm gonna finish the rest of this series anytime soon, and if I do change that, I figure I can just rent them from the library or get ebooks of them, given that I don't love these covers very much. So I'm gonna pass these along. I feel like the local library will get a lot more use out of these. Lots of kids will love these, so I'm gonna pass them on to a loving home in the neighborhood. So I hope some kids read these and love them because they are really fun. I would recommend them. They just didn't like blow me away as an adult, which makes sense. I'm not the target market here. Next, I'm also passing along A Great and Terrible Beauty. I honestly already thought I unhauled this book, which shows how of a disaster my current book stack system is in terms of organization and keeping track of things, because I didn't even think I owned this. But yeah, I have read this book 2.5 times. I'm not a huge fan of it. It's not terrible, but it's just, again, nothing that I thought was particularly great. So yeah, this is a series I'm not going to continue with. I didn't love it, so I'm going to pass it along as well as Olivia Twist. I do think this is kind of clever. It's like an Oliver Twist YA retelling. This has been on my shelf right here for probably 4 years, and I just haven't read it. I also feel like of all of the Charles Dickens stories to give a retelling to, Oliver Twist is not the one that excites me the most. It's probably one of my more least favorite Dickens tales, but you know, that's a story for another day. But yeah, this is going bye-bye. Next up, I have We Were Liars by E. Lockhart. I'm personally not a huge E. Lockhart fan. I've read this book. It didn't blow me away. I feel like people love or hate this, and I'm definitely more on the negative review side. It was just like, it had a setup that I would like. I really love an unlikable cast of characters and some sort of like bizarre someone thriller. Someone who I feel like has done this really well is Marisha Pessl, but this book didn't really, you know, knock my socks off. I don't need to own a copy of it, so I'm going to donate this. Next are just 2 books that I own multiple copies of, so I'm trying to cull those down. I only need 1. I keep telling myself that. The first one is American Royals by Catherine McGee. This is a book that I actually haven't read, but I really want to, and I have a hardcover copy of it on my shelf. This is like a reimagining of American history where America has a royal family and our main character is like a descendant and an heir to that throne, which sounds really fun and like lots of drama. And then I also have another copy of Vicious. I somehow just keep accumulating copies of Vicious, probably because it's one of my favorite books, and I just have a terrible self-control when it comes to collecting multiple versions of my favorite books, but I only need 1 is what I keep trying to tell myself. Right, next I have Heartless by Marissa Mayer. I think this honestly just doesn't have amazing reviews, and I also didn't love Renegades by Marissa Mayer, and I never finished the Lunar Chronicles. So if I'm being honest with myself, like in terms of priority list, I just don't see myself picking this up soon. It's really nothing against this book, but in terms of like the TBR list of all the books I want to read, I just feel like it's kind of closer to the bottom given those factors. I think it's a Beauty and the Beast retelling, which does intrigue me. I love a retelling, but I just really do not foresee me reading this, so I'm just gonna pass it off to someone who will and will enjoy it, which is kind of like the general theme here. But yeah, I'm gonna unhaul this. Next 2 books might be a bit of a surprise, but it is the Book of Spirits and Thieves and The Darkest Magic by Morgan Rose. The first 2 books of the spin-off series of the Fallen Kingdoms, which I read at the beginning of my booktube career and enjoyed. I found them to be very entertaining and interesting. I thought the last 2 books were a little weaker. Overall, it's like a very solid YA fantasy story. It wouldn't be my favorite, but I enjoyed it, reading it along the way. That being said, I don't really see myself picking up the spin-off series. I have also seen very mixed reviews about these, and there's just a lot of fantasy that I want to read. And again, I've held on to these since they've come out, and I just don't see myself reading them. So I'm gonna pass them along. Yeah, this is more of like, I just don't think this YA fantasy series is for me. Let me know if you guys have strong positive feelings about this, but I don't know. I'm just not very intrigued by this, I won't lie. Next, I have Seafire, which, listen, I love a mermaid, eerie, dark sea tale. It's kind of a weakness of mine, kind of like a buzzword, like folklore, dark magical forest, and also dark magical ocean mermaids. Something I like, but this is just one that, compared to the books I have read in this genre, I think I've started this and it didn't really capture my attention. And since then, it just hasn't really called me back. The siren's call is just not there. So I'm just going to pass this along. Also gonna be unhauling from Unseen Fire. I mentioned this in my July wrap up, but this was a DNF for me. Overall, just disappointed by the story. This is a Roman inspired fantasy story with elemental magic, but honestly, I found it to be pretty boring. So I am going to be getting rid of this as well. All right, the next book I have is The Doll Maker of Krakow. This is a book I honestly forget I own. every book on haul, and then I come across it, I'm like, oh, I should read that, and then I never do. So at this point, I came across it during another book on haul, and I was like, I have to get rid of it now. I have passed on it so many times, and I keep forgetting I even own it, so that to me is just a sign. No matter how interesting I think the synopsis is, it's just not gonna happen. So it is going bye-bye. Next two books I'm gonna unhaul are Shatter Me and Restore Me. This is the first book to the Shatter Me trilogy, and I think the first book to the new set of books. I just feel like this is a series, if I revisited, I wouldn't like as much. And I don't really want to like mess with that memory of the Shatter Me trilogy because I did love it and enjoyed it so much when I read it in high school and freshman year of college. So I think I'm just gonna like let it live. So I'm gonna unhaul Shatter Me. I've also just heard not the best things about the next book in this series, and it kind of apparently messes with a lot of stuff that happened in the Shatter Me world. So I just feel like this is not something I'm looking to reread, and I'm just gonna let it live in the fondness of my memory. With Warner and that one notorious chapter, that is where it will live. Next I have is The Guest List by Lucy Foley. This is a book I read and liked. I definitely thought it was good. It wasn't amazing, and because it's a thriller, I don't really foresee myself reading it again because I know how it ends. Generally speaking, I don't reread a lot of thrillers unless I loved it so much. So this is just one that I think I'm just gonna pass on because I think someone else would really love it and really enjoy the ride. And it's just not an all-time fave, and I read it already. So I'm going to donate this along to someone else. Getting close to the end here, the last two books are also duplicate copies. The first one is All the Bright Places. This is the Netflix film tie-in edition, which I just don't need two copies, and I prefer the original cover to, you know, a movie cover, which is generally the case, though this is a nice floppy paperback, so, you know, it's in good condition, but generally speaking, I just don't need two copies of anything. That's what I'm telling myself. Next up is The Boyfriend Project. Similar story here. I bought a paperback of this, so I just don't need two, and so I'm gonna pass this version along because I just don't need two copies. And hey, this book should be out into the world anyway, so I'm happy to supply the world with more copies with my forgetful purchasing habits. Last book is probably the one that is the most bittersweet, the one I really want to keep with all of my soul, and that is Shadowfell by Juliette Marillier. I've owned this book for 5-6 years, like so long, and it's because it's by Juliette Marillier, which is a well-known, very famous fantasy author. And she's an author I have not read any books from, and is an author that I'm dying to read books from because they're beloved. And I also think I would love them given kind of the general topics that she writes about. Magical forests are usually woman-centered, which I think is great. But when I'm thinking about the titles on Juliette Marillier's backlist, this isn't the one that I would pick up first or even second. So because of that, I feel like when I'm going to finally read her, I'm going to focus on those primary series that are like really at the top of my list. And depending on how I like them, I can always revisit and rebuy Shadowfell if I need to. But literally because I've had this book for so long, it does not need to be on my shelf. And I can reward myself with it again when I finally read Juliette Marillier's books. Alrighty guys, that is my big book unhaul. Hopefully that inspired some space to fill up again with books that I want to buy. You know, cheers to me hopefully continuing to be hard on myself and me not dying from a collapse of the book stacks that surround me in my apartment. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I will see you soon with another one soon.